Welcome to the Young and Adulting podcast, a place where we discuss real things in real time around faith and culture as a young adult today. So let's grab a cup of coffee and jump on in. Welcome back to another episode of the Young and Adulting podcast. Happy December. It is a Christmas miracle season. So excited for Christmas, but excited for our conversation today. If we haven't met, my name is Tyler. I get to be a part of our Young Adults ministry here at the church. And I'm really excited about today's episode because I'm joined by my colleague, my friend, and someone that you probably already know. I'm joined by Karissa today. And if you don't know this, Karissa led our Young Adults ministry for a decade or 15 years or...
No.
20 years. Yeah,
it was like 8.
Yeah, let's go. Well, you probably don't need an introduction, but really excited that we get to sit down and talk about today because it's now December, but we just came out of National Adoption Awareness Month,
right.
Which is really exciting. And a couple weeks ago, got to host online on Sunday and got to just share with our online church family some of the stories that have been happening and all the things that are going on in that world, of which you are mostly responsible. And so, what an incredible time to be able to celebrate those things.
Yeah, it's really amazing just what God is doing in the life of our church.
Yep.
And honestly, it all kind of began a couple years ago when Pastor Todd and Julie laid out the vision to get there first.
Yep.
You probably heard it before that in the race to the heart of the next generation, the first one there wins. And we just knew that even though for the last 40 years of our church, we've been committed to caring for foster kids that have been that need to be adopted, just the vulnerable kids in our community. We've always been committed to them. Actually, our founding pastors, Coach Tom and Miss Donna, they started a ministry 25 years ago called Place of Hope that's cared for over 300,000 kids that have touched the foster care system. And it's always been a part of who we are as a church, but really in the last 2 years, we've said, we are going to double down our efforts to reach these kids, to love on these kids, to raise up Christian foster families, Christian adoptive families that are not just going to provide tangible needs, physical needs, but they're going to provide the spiritual needs of these children. And we have seen God just breathe on this ministry.
Yeah, it's been super cool. But like I said, so much of this is like a fruit of you taking the step and paying attention to the burden. So for those, and we'll get into this probably in the talk, who aren't as familiar with foster care and adoptive initiatives and processes, where did this start for you, right? For because all of the things that are happening are coming from your leadership and from just really the green light to go and pursue this, but it started somewhere. So for those who are like, man, how did this all happen in your life? How would you take us?
Well, I'm 31 now, but at 21 years old, my husband Cole and we got married, and we just knew kind of from the beginning that we were going to commit to caring for vulnerable kids. It's always been a passion of mine. I grew up serving in our Belglade ministry, just 45 miles west of here. Come on, shout out to the Belglade campus. Before it was a campus, we were doing just this amazing after-school ministry. We still do it, where the kids on the streets would come into the building, and we'd feed them dinner, we'd help them with their homework, and we'd, pray over them, we'd teach them the Bible. And this is where my first exposure to kids that were entering the foster care system happened. These kids would just stop showing up to the program. And I'm like, where'd they go? And that's where I learned about foster care, that these kids were being so neglected or abused at home that the state was having to step in, remove these kids, place them into different foster homes. And a lot of times they would end up in a different county. And so they weren't going to their same school. They weren't showing up to the program that they would go to every day after school. And they were just nowhere to be found for a couple months, a year, even more. Sometimes they never came back. And so I just knew that this was always going to be something that I was going to be a part of. I was going to help vulnerable kids. I didn't know what it would look like. But one day, Cole and I, 22, 23, lived in a 500 square foot apartment with I guess you could call it a guest bedroom. It was probably half the size of a standard bedroom. Very little money, just very little resources. But we just had this burden, and we sat in a service where we were challenging a bunch of church leaders to empty out the foster care system by placing foster kids into Christian homes. And we should call people in our church up to this calling. And we just knew that this was something that we weren't just going to ask other people to do, but that we were going to step up and do. And so we started to take the foster care classes. We started to learn all the things we needed to learn, get our home ready the best we could. And literally one day we were in Disney World. We were in line at the Tower of Terror, our first ride of the day, and we got our first phone call. And this guy on the phone, he's like, hey, we've got this baby girl. She doesn't have a name, and she's 4 days old. She needs to be picked up in the next 2 hours. Can you come get her? And we were like, oh my gosh, we've never had children. Yep. We didn't really know that it was going to be like this. Come in 2 hours. There's a baby waiting for you. So we drove home from Orlando. Of course, we stopped at Krispy Kreme on the way because you've got to. And we walked into the hospital room, and there was a baby girl. All the other babies were being held by their mom and dad. And this baby was by herself in the corner of the nursery. And they were like, that one's yours. And we took her home. We had her for 4 months. And then she moved to an aunt. But that was really just the beginning of our foster care journey. And really over the last 8 years, Cole and I have fostered, we've kind of lost count at this point, but around 15 kids. Specifically, we've fostered 8 newborns. So we've basically had a newborn every year, which is kind of crazy. This is why I have bags under my eyes. Don't look too close. But these newborns usually come into care because their moms were doing drugs while they were pregnant. And so they would be withdrawing from drugs as soon as they were born. And so we've done this for the last 8 years. It's always been a huge passion and burden in our hearts. And God has just kind of opened the doors along the way to expand our ministry beyond just our home, but into the community, into other places in the church.
Yeah, that's amazing. How did that first baby in your house mark you guys? After that, the baby was released to the aunt. What was the conversation afterward?
Yeah, I mean, we were literally 22 years old. So many of you listening, you're 22 right now. You probably could not imagine your life. Baby dropped off at your doorstep within 2 hours notice. And so our whole life shifted just by becoming a parent, first of all. But then for this child to transition out of our home, I mean, we knew what we were stepping into. We know that the goal of foster care is for a child to have a temporary living space, that a foster family that would temporarily care for them, because the goal is that they would be able to reunify with their family. Okay. And so we knew this was the goal, but we never actually felt that into that moment where this aunt came to our house, showed up on a doorstep. We passed this 4-month-old that we've labored over the last 4 months, and we just cried. And it was emotional. It was real and raw. But it was really a fresh reminder that everything belongs to the Lord. All these children belong to the Lord, and that our temporary assignment was to care for that 4-month-old, or for that newborn to 4 months, and that the Lord would entrust us with her for 4 months is an amazing gift. So it was a reminder that we actually think about all the time, just everything, whether you're a foster parent or not, belongs to the Lord. It's temporary, and we're just entrusted to steward the things that God placed in our life. And so it was a journey. It was definitely emotional, but it compelled us to step in and do more. For sure. Yeah,
that's amazing. This is a verse you probably think about all the time, but when it comes to conversations like this, that James verse that says pure and undefiled religion in God's sight is this, to care for the widow and the orphan and to live unstained before the world. But that's what I think about when I think of people like you and Cole, and I think about ministries like this. And unfortunately, it's a really easy out of sight, out of mind. For most people, if you're not in that world, or if you're not surrounded by that world. And so if you could just take a couple minutes and just assuming listeners know nothing about how kids end up in it, what happens, what the process is, just the nuances that are, bring us up to speed.
Yeah, I think it's interesting you say it's out of sight, out of mind. And I would agree with that, because before I knew about foster care, I was completely ignorant to what it was. But the truth is, it's literally everywhere you look. So there are children literally probably in your neighborhood that are in foster care or at risk of becoming into foster care. And here's kind of how it starts. So basically, you've got the state, the Department of Children and Families, that's responsible for the welfare of the children in your state. And when a child in your community is either being abused or abandoned or neglected, and their needs are not being met, then the state has to step in. And what they try to do is really try to connect, that child to a family member, a relative that could temporarily take custody of them. But there's not always those people. Not everybody has that village. Right. And so really, worst case scenario, a child goes into foster care, which is a completely stranger to them, home that's been licensed by the state to care for children. They've been background checked. Their home is as ready as it can be. It's like the standards are not crazy high. You just have to like want to care for kids and have a safe bed for them to sleep in. And so that's kind of the idea. So foster care really is worst case scenario, that they have to be removed from their biological family. They can't go with a relative. And so now they're having to go with complete strangers. And a lot of time what that looks like is they have to move counties, they have to move schools, they have to not just live with strangers, but now have to make new friends. They have to have a new bedroom, potentially new siblings that live in the home. And there's so many factors to it that affect these kids. And so this literally happens everywhere. I mean, we're in Palm Beach County right now here recording this, but I know many of you guys might be in the Treasure Coast. And on average, just in Palm Beach County, 23 kids a day get removed from their home and placed in foster care.
That's a lot.
It's a lot of kids.
A lot.
I think the stats now are somewhere between 300,000 kids a year touch the foster care system. It's sometimes even more. Wow. There are probably better or worse years. And so these are kids that their needs are not being met at home. And worst case scenario, they're having to move in with these strangers to them. And so, I mean, the need is great. And then the effects are really significant. You don't think about this a lot, but sometimes their kids go into really bad foster homes. Sometimes kids go into foster homes that can't keep them for a long time, and they end up bouncing from home to home. Some people listening, this actually might be their story. I've met plenty of people in our church that they're like, yeah, I grew up in foster care. I went to 8 different foster homes because nobody could keep me. My behaviors were so crazy, or whatever reasons that weren't even their own fault. They had to move from different homes, and the effects of that are so real. And a lot of kids, especially that come into foster care later in life, 12, 13, 14, they end up never being able to go home with their family, and they need to be adopted. And the problem is not a lot of people want to adopt teenagers, although like 4 families in our church just last month adopted teenagers, which is amazing. But what happens is these kids end up aging out of foster care, which just means they grow up and never get to call somebody mom or dad formally. And think about when you step into college or step into career and not have somebody to go home to for Thanksgiving, like you did last week, like not have a family to sit around the Christmas tree with. Like, these kids are really at-risk kids. And a lot of time what we see, I think the stat is over 50% of the people, the criminals that sit on death row, were kids that aged out of foster care. So just like the community effects when a kid doesn't have a family, it's crazy. It affects the crime in your city. It affects the jail in your city. It affects the well-being of the families in the city. And so, I mean, this is what foster care is. It might seem out of sight, out of mind, but really it's these kids that live in our own backyards.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing. If you had to like think through a couple like of your favorite stories or like, I don't know, like victories coming out of the last like decade of like walking alongside some of these kids, do you have any that come to mind?
Yeah. So actually that 4-month-old that we had for our first foster baby, we had from 4 days to 4 months. She moved to an aunt, which is good because she was with family. But ultimately the goal is that this family would come back together. She'd be able to live with her mom again. But that wasn't the case at that moment. And so she moved with her aunt at 4 months, and we just continued our foster care journey, our life, and it was 4.5 years later. We didn't hear about this baby for a long time, for 4.5 years. And one day I got a phone call from a random number, and it was this baby's mom. Wow. And she's like, hey, I got my baby back.
Come on.
4.5 years later, she's like, I got my baby back. She's almost 5 years old, but I did it.
Wow.
And she had worked literally for 4.5 years to care, to do all that she needed to do. Her situation was like a mental health situation. She really needed to do some hard work in her life. And she did it. And it was such a victory for us to hear from her. And she's 100%. Like, do you want to meet up at the park? I want you to see her. So we met up at the park, and I saw the baby we held as a 4-day-old.
That's wild.
As a 4.5-year-old. And just celebrated with her mom, just the victory that she had. And so we've had so many moments like that where we've sat across the table of these biological parents who had their children removed from them. And I think early on I was ignorant to think that many of these parents were kind of the enemies in this scenario. Like, you think foster care, how could you abuse, abandon, neglect your kids? And almost every parent I've sat across the table from that's been in this scenario just never intended for this to be the case. And all of them have their own stories of trauma or abuse of their own. And all of them, love their kids and just did not expect their life to get to where it was. And so it kind of birthed this new compassion in me to know, like, man, there's so many more facets to just caring for the children, but that there is this beautiful ministry that could be done to ministering to these parents. And so that's kind of one of the cool stories. Then there's been plenty of hard ones. And so, as you can imagine, abuse is real and sad. And we've had a 4-month-old that's gotten dropped off at our doorstep with bruises all over her body. We've had a 3-year-old that came to us with a full leg cast, couldn't walk because of abuse. We've had an 8-year-old that came to our house, and the first thing she did was unpack her suitcase, pull some picture frames out of her suitcase, put them on the side table, grab her little nightlight and her Bible, and she moved in within the first 5 minutes like it was something she's done a million times over. And it was just like, no 8-year-old should have to do that. Yeah. But she was an expert at moving from home to home. And so there's just so much sad and hard, but there's also so much beautiful ministry that God has done through it. Yeah.
And it's been such a blessing and highlight, I feel like, in our church the last 2 years. So journey started around 2021, fostered all the way through your 20s. Now we're into our 30s. Hello, shout out 30s.
Come on.
30s and new 20s. But really, like, for those that don't know and some that do, you're leading young adult ministry during that time while fostering, doing all those things. What was the tipping point? I know you mentioned like get there first, but like what was the bubble out of your heart? Because all of this, it happened in pockets, but so much of what we're seeing is because you said yes to step and pioneer something from scratch, from ground zero. So like what was it that enabled you to kind of go like, man, I'm doing it?
Yeah. So to be honest with you, I was looking after the young adult ministry at the church, helping Pastor Julie support our sisterhood ministry. But in my home, the ministry that I was doing was foster care. And I have and had such a burden for it that it became so significant. When I say a burden, I mean like I was up all hours of the night thinking about what I needed to do. I was consumed with the problem that is the child welfare system in our community. Like, it was just this thing, like maybe you've had a burden before that you're just like, this keeps me up at night. This is literally everything I'm praying about and thinking about and consumed with. And God had just burdened me for this in such a new and fresh way. I'd already been doing this ministry for the last 8 years in my home. And I was just asking God, like, man, what do you want me to do? What do you want me to do? Like, I have a job at the church. And I'm literally taking kids into my home, but I feel like you're increasing this burden in me. And what do I need to do about it? And it almost got to the point where I felt like I had to ask myself the question, like, God, do you need me to leave working at the church to go do work in social work or, go somewhere else? Do you need me to do that? I'll do whatever you need me to do. This burden was so significant. And so I just kept praying. I talked to a few people in my life, trusted people, and simultaneously Pastor Todd and Julie pulled me into a meeting in their office, and they were just like, hey, we were wondering if you would kind of start this foster care ministry within the church. And I was like, what? Yes, of course. So cool. And it was just like, it was this moment where I realized like I didn't have to leave to fulfill the burden that God had placed in my heart. Like, he had completely lined this up from the beginning. And so that's really where it started. And talk about pioneering something from the ground up. I've done that a few times before. I feel like God has kind of gifted me to do some of that. Doesn't mean I always do it well. No, doesn't mean that. But I do think there are lots of people probably listening that want to start something. You want to pioneer something. You've got this God dream. You've got this vision, or maybe you've been tasked with something and you're going, doesn't exist, and now I need to build it. I think there's a couple things you need to do that. I think the first thing is you need a compelling vision. And foster children are pretty compelling, right? The Bible's pretty clear about what we need to do about children and orphans. And so we had this compelling vision, and it wasn't something I needed to drum up. It was there. The need's there, but it needed to get in front of people. And so casting this compelling vision, I think, is really important if you're trying to start something. And then finding committed people, I think, is super important. And God had just kind of brought these few people in my circle. One lady, her name's Michelle Smith, Terry Seiler, and Claudia Mendoza. These are 3 ladies that from the beginning They don't work at the church. They don't work in ministry. So most of them are retired at this point, and they just kind of raised their hand and said, like, I heard the vision and I'm all in, whatever it takes. And these ladies have literally been running this ministry with me from the beginning. And so I think compelling vision, committed people, and then just a call from God to keep going, like building a plane in the air, making things up as you go, and being ready to pivot and change when you realize that was a really bad idea to do something is great. And so that's kind of how it went down.
Yeah, which is so cool. And I love that you're doing this like through the local church. So maybe speak about like the timing, like what it meant for you in that timing, like where it was something in your heart, and then for you to be able to be in the home, be in the church, and really mobilize the people to do something that God had graced you to do. Like what did that mean for you as well?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's huge. I've seen God do this in my life many, many times before. Like, I've got a burden, I've got a dream, I've got a passion. And I've never had to bang down a door that God just wanted to open freely for me. Yep. And so it's honestly just super affirming to know that, like, I'm walking in step with the Holy Spirit. Like, I hear from God. Sometimes it doesn't always make sense, but he's always working things out. He's always lining it up. And so the timing was amazing. I mean, I know God and Pastor Todd, they all kind of, they're working closely together. And so really just trusting the leadership of this house that I've submitted myself to. Like, God's called me to Christ Fellowship. God's called me to Pastor Todd and Julie. And, I mentioned how I was like even contemplating, God, do you need me to leave? Like, I let them in on that. And I was just like, hey, I've got this burden. I don't know what to do with. Pastor me through this, And so I think just submitting to your leadership is crucial. And knowing that a lot of times what God's burdening you or calling you to, you're going to find right where you're at. Yeah, it's the story of David. We've seen this all throughout Scripture that God will find you right where you're at, and he did. Yeah, that's a word and a half. So here we are about to enter into 2026, and you and your team are crushing it. So the foster care and adoptive initiatives, all things are happening. So if someone's listening like, man, this is like, I didn't know this was going on in our church. How can I be a part? Just talk through all of the offerings, talk about all of the interest meetings, for people to jump in. Yeah. Well, some of you are 22 or a little older, and you're like, I want to foster or adopt. I was that girl. I was 22. I was married young, and I was like, I didn't have children of my own, but this is what I wanted to do. And so I wouldn't put it past some of those people that, like, maybe God is asking you to do that. And so if he is, you can just email me and I'll help you do that. But for most of us, there is a part we can play. And, the stats show that within the first year of a family becoming a foster family, they quit within 1 year because it's just so hard. Like, it's difficult. And it's not usually the kids that are difficult, although there are some challenges there. It's the system, it's the frustration, it's the pain. And so we've seen that stat completely change when there's a support system around these families. Like, people that are just going, I can drop off pizza once a month for dinner. Like, or saying, hey, I can come babysit for 3 hours once a month. And we've seen so many volunteers in our church step up to go, I can't foster, I can't adopt, but I can support a foster or adoptive family. And that's what they've done. They've come clean their house. Aaliyah from the Trinity campus, she's done that once a month for one of our families. She goes and just kind of vacuums the floor, does some laundry, and it's huge for our families. And so maybe you've got a gift to do something like that, to babysit, to make a meal. You can be a part of that, cf.church/foster care. We've got so many opportunities. We can link them in the show notes. Or maybe you want to serve with us. We do a once a month event. We call it Kids Night Out. Come on. And for many of our families, they've got lots of kids. They don't just trust anyone with their kids, but they trust the church. And so once a month, they'll drop their kids off on a Friday night, and we put on a really fun event for the kids. And the families get to go out on a date, take a nap, whatever they want to do. And you can come and hang with the kids, be a part of that. It's always a good time. And really, there's so many ways. We truly believe everyone can do something to care for the vulnerable kids in our community, and everybody ought to. And so we invite you to be a part of that. Awesome. Well, this has been awesome. And I've said this before, but you're an incredible leader, so gifted, and just thank you for your yes. And I think you're a great example for every young person who has a burden in their heart, a passion in their heart, what it looks like to step into that, stay submitted, and then, just make an impact for the kingdom. And when you're doing that, so it's a fun season. It's the Christmas season. And so just so cool to see. We got the, Christmas party's coming up on the 12th at Port St. Lucie, 13th
at Gardens.
Yep.
And so hopefully, people jump in and be a part.
Yeah.
But thank you. And really, for everyone who's listening, if this isn't a conversation you've been familiar with, please follow Karissa, learn from this, and raise your hand to be a part if God's tugging on your heart. And it's an incredible opportunity to come alongside, to be the hands and feet of Jesus. And so it is a great season. But I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you do have questions or want more details, we'll have some of those resources that she mentioned in the show notes, and stay along for the ride as we continue with the Young Adulting podcast. And we will see you next time. Merry Christmas.